Go.
That was gay.
Go.
I try to hide all my deepest feelings. I think there's something wrong with me, 'cause all I see is death. Every time I go outside, I look like I've been doing meth. And I sleep for 19 hours on a Thursday afternoon. Every now and then I cough up blood, and I don't know what to do. I don't know why I feel like shit. I will not see a therapist.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to fucking kill yourself, put your fucking hands up. Yeah, raise your plates in the air, everybody. Now, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, 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 help, 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 help.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Chris, and this is Ready the Guy Training. Today, we're going to go over the Holosun LS 321. This has actually been out for quite some time. It hasn't gotten much like boost up as far as, you know, like, hey, they make this, and not a lot of people are terribly aware of it and that kind of thing. And anytime that I teach like a private night vision class or whatever, I get a lot of questions about it specifically. So I figured that after a while, I would go ahead and do this thing a little bit of justice anyway and give it a pretty solid review. So as far as the testing period for this so far, this individual unit we've been using for a tick over 8,000 rounds. You know, just under 3,000 of it was shot by other students in again, private night vision classes that had, you know, like their D-ball or whatever go down, or they just didn't have the gear or whatever, right? And just a tick over 5,000 was shot by me between this gun, a 14.5-inch AR, a Bren, the BRN 180, sorry, and a couple of different AKs. So so undershooting a bit, we'll call it 8,000 rounds. Most of this was shot during cold weather or cold and wet weather. Mostly because if you have electronic equipment that's doing night vision stuff, you're going to run into the most problems when it's, friggin' cold outside. So, let's talk about the actual build quality, the decisions that were made as far as controls and all that, and then we'll go on to its performance and its capabilities, how it handles particular things, and that kind of jazz. So, the unit itself, it's an interesting setup in that it's pretty narrow compared to, for instance, and I'm going to make a lot of comparisons to the D-Ball A3 because as far as like output from the Illuminator and IR laser, what I found is that it's identical. So I'm going to make a lot of comparisons to it because that's an IR device that has, identical output, and then we'll talk about build quality and all that jazz. So, making a lot of comparisons to that. We're more narrow, but we sit a little bit taller than a D-Ball A3. The battery compartment is up front, and it seems to have very, very well-made contact springs, that kind of stuff. Because while this is a unit that I have individually been testing, I've also been watching these lasers for quite some time to see if there's any issues with them and that kind of deal. And nobody that I know that uses them quite a bit, or, really at all, has ever really complained about contact issues, and that kind of thing. So guys that have D-Balls and D-Ball A3s and that kind of stuff will immediately cock an eyebrow to that because that's interesting. IR laser, Illuminator, and Viz laser are all slaved onto the right-hand side. And it's all self-contained into a sunken lens, which I personally really like because, I just know that if I'm configuring stuff, I don't have to dodge both sides of the brick. It's just one. So that helps me out quite a bit in that arena. What I have noticed is much like a lot, again, a D-Ball A3 or whatever, is that if you have a front sight tower or something like that, or really anything in front of this, the Illuminator and the Viz laser occasionally, well, not occasionally, always will catch this just a little bit so you can see that. Now, is it easy to see if you're way backed off or even a little backed off? It starts getting really, really difficult to notice once you're beyond 30 yards. So, it's a tiny little pinprick, and it seems to hide itself really well. And 30 is a little unfair. I'll call it about 50-ish. It's really, really hard to see. And there, of course, if you're worried about, being caught as far as signature and that kind of stuff, you're doing a lot of shooting with a IR unit and a laser that's pointing at stuff. So by the time that we're doing the pointing, it's kind of like a white light. They do know you're there. So, that is what it is. Here's the other deal. I noticed that this unit specifically was originally designed to not float on the 12 o'clock rail of, pick a thing. Because you can actually see it up here. It says left, right, and then up, down here. So you can actually tell that it was meant to ride on the sides, rather on a side of a rifle rather than up top. And a lot of people have gotten confused at this before. I've gotten more than one set of DMs asking me, hey, is this fucked up because I keep doing the left and right thing? It's no. This is now up, down, and this is now left, right if it's sitting up top. It's just orientation of how it was originally designed to be used. That is what it is. So, don't get confused by this. This is just how it was originally designed. Are they going to make changes to it? I don't friggin' know. But that's just kind of how that is. And I guess that ages me as far as how fast I was able to figure that out, because I come from an era of guys where a lot of the time your stuff was riding on the side. So as far as what's going on in the rear here, I really, really like this, because this adjusts your Illuminator and how wide or tight it's going to be. And I really, really like just being able to reach up here and do that instead of having to break it down, get on a really tight cone, do whatever. Up front, I can just do that up here based off of the profile that I need for that particular moment in time. I really do appreciate that a lot. Now, a couple of puzzling things, but there again, this is all just personal preference. This knob for your, selection of what the brick is actually doing and the manual fire button are actually a little more stiff than you would think. Now, this really is the difference between, like, for instance, Surefire X300s and Streamlight TLR1s. One's got pretty stiff controls. The other one has pretty loose controls. I'm a loose control guy. I don't need to. I don't need to feel safer as far as my buttons or my switches and that kind of stuff is concerned, requiring me to press on them super hard. But other people that I know that rock the house with this stuff prefer the exact opposite. It's a personal preference of mine. I don't really like that these two are stiffer. Some guys will like that, though, just based off of their experiences and what they appreciate and what they don't. So there's that. It's a nitpick for me personally in that I don't like it, but there again, there's other people that are going to disagree with me entirely over that. That's totally fine. So here's the one thing about this that's kind of weird. Oh, well, before we get to that, in the back here, we have a receptacle for like standard Steiner switches and that kind of stuff. And the cool part about this is that the side body of this guy is just wide enough to accept a Steiner switch that you can Velcro on there. Depending on what it is that you need, you may choose to want to press the side of that brick, or if, for instance, you're mounted on the side of the gun, you're left-handed or whatever, you can actually rig up pretty decent solutions for, a pressure pad that you can just Velcro to the side of the thing. And on top of that as well, it also hides its IR. Here's the deal with this. The coating for this is not IR compliant, which means if it gets hit by an illumination source, it'll show up bright. The way to solve this is friction tape / paint, or yes, that is what it is. Like I said, this does sit a little narrower, but as far as your left to right, which actually does make it really nice as far as, throwing lights on and that kind of junk, because, there's a whole bunch of aftermarket stuff that exists specifically to get lights to pair up nice and close to, for instance, PEC 15s or D-balls, for instance, because they try to mushroom over the top of the rail and that kind of deal. This doesn't do that anywhere near as much, but, and this is for people that give a damn about this, it does sit a little bit taller. However, if you have a lower 1/3 or greater, it's just not in your field of view. It's not really a big deal. So, there's all that. As far as its reliability is concerned, this is where I get a little upset, honestly. So that unit, the LS321 is between $700 and $800, depending on where you get it from. By contrast, a D-ball A3 is at minimum at least $1,200. The issue that I have with this is that if you've been doing this for a while, you notice a thing or two or 12 about Steiner, and that, for instance, again, we're gonna use that as a direct competitor, the A3, and in a lot of cases the A4, but the D2, but we'll stay at the A3 for a moment. Its performance is the same as the LS321. It costs significantly more, and they have significantly more problems. Like I said, people that hear that the LS321, for instance, doesn't have like contact issues or battery compartment issues or springs walking out or lasers failing to fire when it's really, really, really cold, or, switch contacts dying or whatever. You don't hear about all of these things breaking down, or the illuminators quitting for no reason, or illuminators just walking off, as far as whether or not, they stay where you want them to be. You run into a lot of those issues. And then also, like, if you try to call Steiner customer service, you would have an easier time curing cancer than getting your friggin' problem fixed. And that's just a problem. It's a problem, and it's been a problem for a really long time until Around about it, when I first started seeing these lasers, around about 5, 6, maybe longer years ago. Um, and now that just isn't the case. From what I see as far as its performance is concerned, whether it's on guns that run hot, whether it's real cold, whether there's a ton of moisture in the air, whether it's been laying out, sitting outside for a really long time because I'm teaching a vehicle class and I just left the gun outside in very heavy rain for 2 days, whatever. It seems to just not care about any of that. I don't need cheat codes to make it run good or change batteries or any of that nonsense, because I do know people that have taken, like, for instance, a liking to the D-Ball A3 or the military variant of the PEC 15 for them, which is their PEC 15 Alpha, is what that's designated as, the gray boy. And there's so many guys that have to rig up like cheat codes and friggin' Ouija board sections to get their fucking laser to work well or take a battery without causing any problems. Because they know that if they send anything to frickin' Steiner, it's either never going to come back because it's a military unit, or their problem is just not going to get fixed. So you have better performance, you have way better customer service, with the drawback of I have to spray paint the thing. And then the controls are a little more stiff. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that every single time over the nonsense that we've had to deal with as far as Steiner, D-balls, and that kind of stuff for years. I'm just going to take that. And of course, obviously, there's other solutions that are out there, but again, this is just a direct comparison really to that in this arena. So let's talk about its capabilities. Let's talk about where it does well. Let's talk about where it doesn't. So where it does well, at least in my mind anyway, is it does really, really well in like mission set and that kind of stuff that is very similar to why it is that you use a non-magnified dot as a primary for most things. Because really, really easy to use, and absolutely no problems whatsoever dealing with camouflaged or hard to see things out to 2 football fields. Like, that's where dots like really, really shine. They're real fast out to 2 football fields. You can see stuff that's trying to hide from you really easy and handle it with no extra issues. And yeah, obviously, guys, I know people can shoot further with red dots, but 300, it starts getting pretty hard to see camouflage people without magnification, especially if your eyes are getting aged, and especially if they're trying to hide because they're not trying to be shot. And then further than that is a problem. So that really is that arena for, like 200 and in is like really where the dot is, at least in my eyes, the superior option for most things. This is similar to that, in that if it's a regular night and whether or not I got the moon out, the Illuminator is just powerful enough to where I can easily identify things. I can see contrast as far as different objects moving around, particularly humans, because like on a flat range isn't the only place I've used this. I've used this in my unit and that kind of stuff, and we've gone out, we've done training at night, and I've had to illuminate people in the dark and all that other shit. So it's pretty easy to see humans moving around, particularly your face piece, because that's the highest contrast point, is your face in the dark, especially if you're getting hit by a laser illuminator or a laser emitted illuminator, that kind of thing. So there's that. It doesn't have issues 0 to that range with painting the shit out of smoke, which is a real big problem for LED emitted illuminators. So that knocks out your D2. And it's really easy to PID stuff without over painting targets. So quite unlike really, really powerful flashlights, where if there's, for instance, a window and there's a thing behind that window a ways like 10, 15, 20 feet that you need to be able to see, a super powerful flashlight will paint that area, but it'll also reach the thing behind that, and you can make that easy to see. With a lot of illuminators, under very similar circumstances, if you have a really powerful illuminator based off of the intensifier in the tube that you've got, if you overpaint a surface in front of the thing that you're trying to see, it's much harder now to see through that window or through that brush or whatever it is if you overpaint it. So that's where I find those issues for me personally. And this floats a really nice fine line between painting stuff well enough for me to see it good and not over painting the shit out of things. Like, for instance, like a PEG 15 on high is like way too much for me to properly PID, thread needles on bullets and that kind of stuff, usually at like a football field and in, right? And that's like PEG 15 full power, and it's doing its thing. Or, for instance, like a Maul on its lesser than full power with its military unit is a lot, right? But quite unlike, for instance, the Maul, where you can back off to where it's a really wide scanning thing for basically room clearing. It's low mode, which is basically a PEG 15 on high, and then it's turbo, which I could illuminate dudes on the fucking moon with the thing. There isn't like a low-ish mode there, right? So in this really, really almost niche space between 0 and like 200 is where you start running into those illumination issues. Now that I've said that it performs the best in this range, I'm going to undercut what I just said by saying there's a particular point in the day where this is just not the case. Again, much like a D-Ball A3 that has the same performance, once your dew point is really high and once you have moisture roiling up off the ground, or it looks like mist that just rolls across terrain features and that kind of thing, because that moisture content is really high and because there's more physical stuff in the air that your illuminator is catching, that relative range, really, as far as what you can see really well, is about halved. Like, I can see small details, tiny plates, or little objects that I'm trying to shoot at about 100 now, 125 really. So it's about halved because of that, right? And obviously there are things that have less of a problem with this, like, for instance, like I just said, for instance, a full power PEG 15 or a Maul trivializes that kind of shit. It just punches right on through it. And that's really what they're made to do, because they're battlefield implements that have provisions for close range and stuff, right? So that's where you get a lot of your advantage, and in this case a disadvantage for this. So that seems to occupy its niche, and as far as like individuals and that kind of stuff is concerned, especially if you're in more urbanized areas, or if you're in the burbs where you could get a lot of wooded junk like this and not tons of light pollution, that's where it really shines the most for me. Is because, up until you hit that really heavy dew point, that's like your last 2.5 hours at night, you're getting out to 200 plus, and I've shot further than that pretty easily with this illuminator and laser. So, that seems to be where its capabilities really start and end there. As far as photonic barriers, like for instance, between me and the camera at night, there's a big old light source that's cutting between the two of us. Can your illuminator cut through it? Well, this doesn't punch through photonic barriers very easily, but it does highlight things like your eyeballs and your face and other non-IR compliant surfaces pretty easily. So at the very least, you can pick out your contrast and deal with it there. So, is this something to be terribly, terribly excited about? For me, this is where this sits. This sits actually in two arenas. For me, this sits very firmly in if I want to get into this without putting like whole ass boat money into night vision, that's a good way to start. Because again, it's a $700 unit, and you pick up a solid quality tube, which I'll get back to here in just a second, and it's a pretty good pairing. Now, the tubes are the most important parts, and how good your laser and illuminator is doesn't really mean shit if the night vision that you're looking through is not very good. So how I would look at this personally is focus on getting solid quality tube, at least a White Foss thin film Elbit tube. That'll come in, that'll scrape just barely under 3,000. By the time it's shipped, it's 3,000. Okay. And then you pair it with this and you can see well. That is just so much better than assembling a set of tubes or whatever the fuck in your garage, or grabbing a unit that fell off a truck someplace, because most of the time it's recycled trash. It doesn't see things very good, and I see it every single time I teach a night vision class of any sort, is exactly that issue, where there's a guy that's out here with a pretty powerful like Illuminator laser combo that can't see things very well because the tube in front of his face is trash. So focus there, and this is a good place to start as far as like laser illuminator and that kind of stuff. Now, once you upgrade, I wouldn't get rid of it, because for me at least, it's easier, or for me at least, to like PID targets, get contrast and that kind of stuff, and thread needles on bullets, not hit things that I don't intend to hit, right? So in other words, I can hit what I'm shooting at, and I can avoid hitting what I'm not shooting at really, really easily between 200 and in, and at dew point, which is your last 2.5 hours at night, 125. And realistically speaking, that is a pretty wide range of spaces that you really do want to properly PID and thread needles with bullets and that kind of thing. So that's where this thing occupies that niche pretty soundly to me. Now, obviously, you want more powerful units to do more powerful unit things, but in that same realm, you, at least in my thought process with the years I've been doing this with like military powered units and doing a lot of shooting that focuses a lot on you not hitting innocent bystanders, for instance, or just whatever, right? It's just easier to not overpaint in a lot of those situations, which means that a lot of times with like PEC 15s, which is what I have the most experience with, or Mauls or whatever, I usually run lower power on those things rather than, the holy fuck mode on all of them. So, this occupies a pretty good niche in that area. Now, there's some guys that it's just not good for them, either on the type of shooting that they're going to have to do, or where they live, or whatever. And that's fine. Like I get that, guys that are just kind of like, nah, man, I live on land where everything's forever away. That's never going to help me. Nah, dude, don't pick this up if that's the case, right? If the coyote shooting, for instance, that you're doing is way further away than that, this is not going to help you at all. If you live in a moisture dense area, whereas, for instance, it's not so much that you have high humidity, it's that you have like really, really high dew point at night, where you get a lot of that misty shit in the dark. Because, for instance, Florida doesn't have crazy amounts of mist just roiling, through landscape and that kind of thing. I actually see the best with night vision that I've ever seen in either a flat desert or Florida under most circumstances. But in a place like this, 3 to 5 o'clock at night, you start running into a lot of problems being able to see well. So I don't know why that is. Maybe that's why they call it Smoky Mountain areas and that kind of stuff, because of that misty shit. But the point is that if you live in an area that has tons of that, the effectiveness of this is cut down a ton. So that said, pay attention to what it is that you're trying to use. Pay attention to the area that you're in. And more than all of this, get a solid tube and see what there is to see before you start fucking with lasers, because you absolutely positively can waste your time with a brick that isn't going to help you a ton. So, other than that, I mean, the thing works good. It works really well. It does exactly what it was designed to do, and I don't have to deal with something stupid like a friggin' light sticking out of it like in the LE321, although the coating on that is IR compliant, and this one isn't. So, you're going to have to think about what's valuable to you and what isn't. Having a lighter unit that just does what I want it to, and then spray painting the thing, I don't really care about that. So, user preferences, dude. But other than that, look, it just does its job way better than a D-Ball A3. So if you're looking at a D-Ball A3, just stop it, pick this one up instead, and that's all I really got. Okay. So there's good, there's bad, there's reasons to get it, there's reasons not to get it. So there it is. So if you want to come out and train with us, you absolutely can. Links for that, the Facebook group, The Patreon that you can use to your advantage is all in the description below. All the links are there. As far as the Patreon is concerned, freaking $41 a month gets you as much training as you want to deal with, as much as you want to deal with, frankly. And there's a lot of people that have abused the shit out of that, and that's why it's there. It's to be abused. Unless it's a private class or a vehicle class, and that's just based on logistics and making it worth it for me to come out randomly for 2 people for a day. Makes sense. So, other than that, you can use that to your advantage. And if you don't want to do like a monthly commitment and that kind of thing, consider whipping a super thanks at us. It's like $1 or something. Honestly, all that really does help us out a lot. It allows us to go out and do the nonsense that we do. So I appreciate it, guys. And remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.